Good afternoon, members of parliament, support staff, radio listeners, TV viewers, those following by social media, and members of the media. Good afternoon. Welcome to the continuation of this urgent public meeting number 12 of today, Friday, June 23rd, 2023. I would like to give a special welcome to the Minister of Justice, Ms. Anna Richardson, and her support staff. Meanwhile, we have established a quorum of 10 members. Please stand for a moment of silence. Thank you. I have received notice of absence from the following members: Chairman Siddharth Bijlani, who is away for medical purposes, MP Solange Duncan, and MP Rayon Peterson. We have now arrived at notifications. I see we have a notification from MP Grisha Heyliger-Marten. MP, you have the floor.
A pleasant good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for the notification. Welcome to the Minister of Justice and her support staff. A pleasant good afternoon to my fellow colleagues and those listening and viewing online. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to take this time out in notification to thank the Presidium for having the telemeeting and the telemeeting and the, what was the other meeting again? Now I have so many. Telemeeting and the other airport meeting, because that's what I wanted to address. But thank you for at least allowing those meetings to take place. I have just a question about next week. Next week, we are coming to the ending of this term, but we're going into recess. We only have, I think, maybe 2 days because some of the members of parliament are leaving. And I would like to know if possible, the Minister of TS will be gracing us with his presence, maybe on Monday in the morning or maybe Tuesday morning, seeing that we have, I just take note of the notifications for next week. This meeting was, again, requested on the 14th of November. It was first called the 1st of December, then adjourned, and then called on the 2nd of February. And the then chair of that meeting stated that he will return within a week. That was on the 21st of February, and we're now June. So I would like to know if we can now also close off that urgent public meeting, if that's possible, if the Minister of TIAT will be gracing us with his presence, perhaps maybe Monday morning, seeing that it's open, or Tuesday morning. That's all I want to know, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, MP Grisha Heyliger-Marten. I see no further request for a notification. We go over to the agenda point. We have as agenda point for this public meeting discussion regarding the flow and managing of the inmates at the Princess Juliet at the Point Blanch Prison, incoming document 363 of the parliamentary year 2022-2023, and is dated January 19th, 2023. The meeting was requested by the MPs Heyliger-Marten, Wescot-Williams, and Emmanuel. We go over to the agenda point. On January 19th, 2023, Parliament received a letter, incoming document 363 of the current parliamentary year, dated January 19th, from MP Grisha Heyliger-Marten, MP Wescot-Williams, and MP Emmanuel, with a request that an urgent public meeting of Parliament be convened with the above-mentioned agenda point. The presence of the Minister of Justice was also requested. The meeting was convened on January 25, 2023, during which the requesters of the meeting were given the opportunity to elucidate their request. This was followed by a presentation by the Minister of Justice on the agenda point. After the presentation by the Minister of Justice, in accordance with the Speaker's list, members of Parliament were given the opportunity to pose questions to the Minister in the first round. The meeting was then adjourned to allow the Minister time to prepare the answers to the questions posed by members of Parliament in that first round. The meeting was reconvened on February 9th, 2023, during which the Minister of Justice, Ms. Anna Richardson, provided the answers to the questions posed by the members of Parliament in the first round. The meeting was then adjourned for a lunch break to be reconvened at 1:30 p.m. in the first round of clarification. In the first round of clarification questions from the members of Parliament. However, the meeting could not continue due to a lack of quorum. Today, we have a quorum and the meeting is continuing at the first round of clarification questions from the members of Parliament. The Minister had provided the answers, and now we go to members of Parliament if they can recall the answers and if they had recorded their clarifications as this occurred since in February. Any clarifications? I see there are no need for clarifications. So we go over to the members of Parliament. We are now in the second round, and in accordance with the speaker's list for your, if you have forgotten, the speakers were in the following order: MP Heyliger-Marten, MP Emmanuel, MP Peterson, MP Wescot-Williams, MP Bryson, MP George Pontiflet, and the last speaker on that day was MP Angelique Roumou. So we open the second round with the first MP Grisha Heyliger-Marten, and the speaker's time is 10 minutes in this round. Your time kicks in at 2:33.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I would like to thank the Minister of Justice for all the answers provided earlier, well, a few months ago. And I really, for the most, based on some of the answers received in the first round, I zoomed into maybe trying to provide the Minister of Justice with a short-term solution for assisting with the flow of inmates, and given the fact that up to date, and as I am well aware, it is still at capacity, as much as some of the members, some inmates were flown out, but they're still at capacity. And the fact that we still have like 100 plus inmates to serve, I wanted to assist the Minister of Justice, proposed an assistant to the Minister of Justice, that we perhaps consider having a policy in place for the ankle bracelets. That would help a little bit alleviate the bureaucracy surrounding that. It's mainly based on one of the questions that I asked in the first round, which was, what are the minister's short-term solutions to tackle the prison capacity issues? She said, unfortunately, her response to you, Mr. Chairman, was that, unfortunately, the sad reality in St. Martin is that the rate, oh, sorry, let me just put on my eyes. Yes. the rate at which the crimes are being committed, the severity of the types of crimes being committed, and also, thankfully, the success rate of our law enforcement authorities in apprehending and prosecuting the perpetrators of criminal offenses currently outpaces any limited capacity that is created by the measures that we undertake to tackle capacity issues. She also goes to mention that her last presentation, she said that she has an overall detention policy in place, which is aimed to preventing overcrowding, and this includes a cap on the maximum number of detainees per cell, the use of the alternative accommodation, such as the youth facility that was reopened in 2019, and the opportunity to use electronic monitoring ankle bracelets. And this is where it gets, here's where the bureaucracy is shown. That if possible, conditional release when certain criteria are met in respect to frequent consultations are held between the Ministry of Justice, the prison, the Public Prosecutor's Office, and the parole to assess the situation and decide on the most appropriate measure. Now, Curaçao, Holland, and I think Aruba already has a policy in place for a long time. The law is already there. This motion will just a proposal to the Minister of Justice to consider putting a policy in place, thereby circumventing the long, the long trajectory that it takes to have the ankle bracelets assigned. So with this, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to read the motion, and it is supported by my, let me start with that first. The Parliament of St. Martin, in its meeting of today, June 23rd, 2023, cognizant of the fact, due to the conditions at the Point Blanch Prison and lack of cells, persons imprisoned at the Point Blanch Prison face inhumane circumstances. Aware that this fact is supported by extensive reporting done by the Raad van Rechtshandhaving, and the latter having established that the human rights of prisons are violated due to the described circumstances. Considering that based on the Article 132, Section 2 of the Criminal Code for St. Martin, the Minister has the discretion as it relates to the early release of prisoners or release under preset conditions, that based on Section 4 and 7 of the 4 and 7, the Minister can determine both the procedure as well as the applicable conditions for an early release decision, that the ministerial decree, the issuance of the monitoring by early release of prisoners, known as electronic monitoring ministerial decree, was set and applied, that said ministerial decree encompasses the policy of the Minister for the applications of the issuance of the release by ankle bracelets, that the current circumstances warrants revisit, adjustment, and reinstatement electronic monitoring options to alleviate the pressure on the limited number of cells at the Point Blanch Prison, and to safeguarding the rights of the prisoners and persons sentenced to imprisonment, that an increasing crime rate for violent and heinous crimes and the pressure of the Point Blanch facility will continue to increase at a rate not equaled by the extension of improvements to the facility, while the ad hoc releases of prisoners executed to release the pressure on the facility could place citizens at risk. That globally, the issue of the limited availability of cells is addressed with the enactment of early release programs or programs permitting to use electronic monitoring devices for the execution of the sentences in alternate form, that it is in the interest of the safety and the security of the nation, as well as the imprisoned at and the staff of the Point Blanch Prison, that adequate measures are taken in support of the proper flow of prisoners and the maintenance of the facility to bridge the period until the facility can, in accordance with respect to human rights, facilitate the imprisonment of the convicted persons in St. Martin, and that an intermediary solution, the application of the early release program and the release under electronic monitoring is desired for non-violent criminals. It now resolves to request the Minister of Justice within 2 months of the passing of this motion to enact a revised and updated electronic monitoring program on the basis of an updated policy on early release and release by electronic monitoring of persons eligible for early release, and it goes over to the order of the day. This motion is supported by MP Arundel, MP Sarah Wescot-Williams, MP Gums, MP Brownbill, MP De Weaver, MP Christophe, Emmanuel, and myself. I'll be bringing it over to you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for that.
Thank you, MP Heyliger-Marten. We now move over to MP Emmanuel. No need. MP Rion Peterson is not present today. MP Wescot-Williams. No need. MP Rolando Bryson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon to you, the Secretary General, the members of Parliament, Honorable Minister, and the support staff present, those in the Tribune, and those following this meeting by various media. Mr. Chairman, I definitely am one that believes that as much as possible where we can alleviate the situation with regards to the number of people that are awaiting to really serve their time. You literally have some people that actually are getting in contact with the government, with the judicial branch to say, hey, I have this sentence hanging over my head, what is happening, and they have no idea. It's not a good way for the justice system to move. These people are not able to move on with their lives, pay their debt to society, and reintegrate as reformed citizens within our society. And if by means of using electronic monitoring is a manner that we can do that, I think that is something we should definitely consider. There are multiple ways, however, to do this. I think what MP Grisha Heyliger-Marten proposes on a policy level is one way. It's something that I think we should consider as well. I do also think perhaps we should also look at what we're doing on a national ordinance level, because my fear of only handling it on a policy level, which is a good step in the right direction, is the input of the judicial branch in the decision-making. Because what I have noted that can happen is that if the sentence is laid down by the judge, and it is now up to the judge to make a determination as to whether the person is awarded the opportunity to be monitored electronically or not, does that supersede a policy on a ministerial level? Then we have another issue, that now we have a policy that has a certain intention, but I think we also then should look at how we handle that within our procedure code as well. In the analysis that was done by the Justice Committee with the support of the law firm, Ms. Peggy Ann Brandon, that didn't quite fit within the scope, the original scope of the project. As you know, Mr. Chairman, the goal of that was more to bring us in line with the FATF standards and also in terms of concordancy. But it is something for us to consider in the broader term to see if this is an additional assignment we can look at in terms of what we would want to envision on the criminal procedure code level, how we would integrate electronic monitoring. One of the things you have to consider is also the cost. The fact is, housing someone at the halfway bay versus monitoring someone electronically is significantly less expensive. As a matter of fact, what some states in the United States do is they actually, as part of the sentencing, you must pay for the cost of your electronic monitoring. So maybe that's something that you integrate into your policy. Also, the degree of the crime, whether the person has been a first-time offender or not, whether they're in pretrial detention or not, these are all things I think would need to be incorporated into what you do. I didn't get to read the motion exactly. However, there's one thing I would ask if MP Heyliger-Marten, however, would consider, is I believe in the beginning of the considerations, there were some statements regarding the current inhumane conditions, etc. My only reservation would be if we know it has happened, we can refer to it as there has been, but I'm wondering if the Parliament of St. Martin should declare that it is an inhumane situation. That might be a far-reaching statement. If situations like that exist, that can be mentioned, but I'm wondering if we should really word it that way. Perhaps there have been situations, but I'm wondering if we're going to paint the entire system as completely inhumane. That might be a bit of a stretch. That is just the only thing I would look at when I read the motion to see if the wording on that is fine. But the goal of that motion, I think, is excellent, and I think it's something I would like to hear from the minister in terms of, do you see the need for enacting this not just on a policy level, but also on a national ordinance level? I also think that we should consider in terms of the European standard. I believe they have a protocol that extends also to overseas territories. So what standard are we going to use for electronic monitoring? We don't need to reinvent the wheel. There are standards that exist in the Netherlands, in the European Union, that we can probably much easily come to by not having to reinvent the wheel and create just simply our own standard from scratch. So, Mr. Chairman, basically to hear from the minister in terms of her opinion on that motion and electronic monitoring in general, the efficacy of it, the need to have an objective criteria for this, so it's not a favoritism or this person gets and then someone with the same sentence, same criminal background doesn't get. We also want to avoid that situation, and that is where having these things codified, be it in policy or be it in the criminal procedure code, is definitely important. That'll be it, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, MP Bryson. The next speaker on the list is MP George Pontiflet. MP Pontiflet, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon to the chair, my colleagues in Parliament, and of course, our Honourable Minister. Mr. Chairman, I was listening to, I believe, a motion that was read. And one of the things that I see here, they're talking about the issue of using, that there are European standards that can be used as a model for improving our own probation and correctional policies, in particular that of the Confederation of European Probation, which aims to promote the social inclusion of offenders through community sanctions and measures such as probation, community service, mediation, and conciliation. Mr. Chairman, my issue is in how much does, Mr. Chairman, the minister agree with the issue of, when it comes to European standards, because I remain consistent, Mr. Chairman, when it comes to the issue of what works in Europe, what works in the US, and what works for us. See, European standard, American standard, British standard, Mr. Chairman, again, what's it based on? What is it based on? We have to look at culture. I will look at culture. What is our culture when it comes to these things? Because I'm trying to understand why is it that at times we think, and as I said, I didn't get a chance to read it, but my issue is whatever we bring to the floor of Parliament, I believe should reflect what it is that we are dealing with, what our reality is. There were things I would have agreed to, Mr. Chairman, in the past, but now I'm looking at it from a different perspective, because the fact is I'm realizing that a lot of these things is not me. So I heard a little piece when it's coming out about the issue of ankle bracelets and so on. I didn't get a chance to remember whether there are any kind of financial costs attached to it and so on. And my issue is it has been ongoing for quite a long time. The discussion on that has been ongoing for quite a long time. But, Mr. Chairman, Again, what we are trying to do, I believe, because our prisons are overcrowded, and I would think that we are doing our best to ensure that as much as possible, those that we cannot detain, that we have some kind of control of them while they're out of the prison walls physically. Mr. Chairman, I'll wait to see exactly how this will continue, but again, as I said, I will not just walk in on a motion and just say it's okay, and sign it, and then, unfortunately, you need time to digest certain things, and I haven't had a chance to read it through. So I'll just be honest with that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, MP George Pantaflet. The next speaker and final speaker in this second round, MP Angelique Rumu. MP Rumu, you have the floor.
Pleasant good afternoon to you, Mr. Chairman. Pleasant good afternoon to my colleague MPs, the viewing and listening public, and of course our Honorable Minister and her support staff. At this point in time, Chairman, I will not have any further comments. Thank you.
Thank you, MP Rumu. Members, we have come to the end of deliberations by members of Parliament in the second round. They have come to the end of their questions. Minister, do we need to adjourn to give you time? You can go straight into it. And at the same time, I think there was a request by several members to present your position on the motion. Thank you. Madam Minister, did you have a copy of the motion?
I do not. A pleasant good afternoon, first of all. I do not have, so if you wish for an adjournment, so.
No, I'm saying
but
if-
I'm fine.
If you would
I got the
want,
gist of
if you
what.
want to address the motion, I would assume you would need to know what's in the motion, so we can adjourn for 5 minutes
Sure.
to give you, we'll take 10 minutes
Okay.
to give you and your staff the opportunity to peruse the motion. Where is it? Okay, so what we'll do, it's being booked in. So what we do, you'll address the questions if there were one or two of them, and then after that, we'll adjourn to give you an opportunity to address and speak to the motion. Minister, you have the floor.
Chairman, a pleasant good afternoon to all members of Parliament, my support staff. Thank you for being here with me, and everyone who is joining us in the Tribune or online. Mr. Chairman, more than likely I have understood the gist of the motion that has been presented by MP Heyliger and those who have supported it. And overall, there's no objection to it. I think it's a positive proposal. However, there are some aspects that I did hear in there. The mention of the inhumane aspect of it, which I find concerning. I find it concerning because it gives the impression as though the facility itself is inhumane, and there are certain views that have been recently done within the prison system that would speak different. It would speak different of, for example, we've gone to court. The inmates have taken us to court on the premise that the facility is inhumane. The courts have ruled against that. They don't see that being the case. I can't speak to the details of it yet, but I look forward to the CPT report being published, because I think that St. Martin will be quite surprised as to how well we've done in comparison in the kingdom. We just concluded the Yeveyo, where my colleague ministers within the kingdom visited, and one in particular is that of Minister Frank Weerwind, who is the Minister of Legal Protection based in the Netherlands. he is over programs or institutions such as DAE, who provides us with the necessary trainings that our staff at the prison will tell you they haven't had trainings in more than 10 years. And finally, we resume the opportunity for them to have such training. And this is provided by the cooperation between the Netherlands and St. Martin, in particular, Minister Weerwind being particularly involved in that. The Progress Committee was here recently, and they themselves are quite impressed with how well it is going at the prison. Now, when we talk about persons who are of the opinion that they should be qualifying for the ankle bracelet, we really, and that is the only element through you, Mr. Chairman, that concerns me, is that any and every individual speaking for themselves will always speak from a perspective that of what they believe is right for them. However, it is very, very much so important to have all the details, to be well and fully aware, especially of the type of crime certain individuals are responsible for. And so are we advocating that the ankle bracelet is something that should be made available to everyone? That can not be. Yes? One of the wonderful things I'd like to say here today is I thank MP Heyliger because she indicates in in the motion that she would like to see that the policy is implemented within 2 months, but we can do much better than that. The motion has already been, the policy has already been drafted. I am just having it reviewed by some other eyes because I want to make sure that it is really a policy that is strong, that is secured, and that all things are considered. So I look forward to being able to publish this policy within the next 2 weeks from today, so that we can be able to put this matter of whether or not individuals are being fairly considered for the ankle bracelet or not. Yes, one of the things that I've come to realize, and we must always take into consideration, because I know that a lot of focus is always the minister can do and the minister can do, but it is very important to understand our judicial structure. We seek for the minister to make a lot of decisions on the forefront, but the minister cannot override the decision of the courts. Yes, so we must first see what is the sentence that has been applied to that person, how much time this person has to serve in our judicial structure to be considered for placement on ankle bracelet, early release, etc. Nevertheless, as I've stated before, we are already in our final phase with the policy that we've been working on for some time. And I'm happy to say that within the next short 2 weeks, we look forward to be able to publish that. But I wanted to address the mention of this inhumane. We do not have persons living in inhumane conditions. We do our best as St. Martin as well with our 30-year-old plus facility to ensure that it is as comfortable as possible, and we are doing everything in our here we have the director of the prison as well, that with his team is doing everything that they can possibly do to ensure that they adhere to standards. I'd like to be able to have, within short, UNOPS come back to Parliament to give a timeline on our progress where that is concerned, because we all know the focus is about bringing down our prison as it is and building a new one that meets the standards of our situation here in St. Martin. So, Mr. Chairman, I have now received a copy of the motion, and as per your earlier statements, my staff and I would appreciate the opportunity to review same. Thank you.
Before we adjourn, MP Heyliger-Marten for 10 minutes. Meeting will be adjourned until 10 minutes after 3. Meeting adjourned until 10 minutes after 3. Good afternoon and welcome back. We adjourned the meeting to give the minister and her staff the opportunity to peruse the motion and for the minister to address the motion. In the meanwhile, we have received as well a slightly amended version of the original draft motion that was presented. I'm not sure if the minister is aware of the changes. Can you indicate what the changes have been? MP Heyliger-Marten, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, Mr. Chairman, indeed, we made a slight change to the cognizant of the fact that due to the conditions at the Point Blanch Prison and the lack of cells, persons and imprisoned at the Point Blanch Prison have sometimes faced inhumane circumstances. So I put have sometimes faced. And the last sentence, I made a slight change based on the suggestion, well, the statement of the Minister of Justice, aware that this fact is supported by extensive reporting done by the Raad van het Lands Rechtshandhaving, and the latter have established that the human rights of the prison have been violated due to described circumstances. So I added the words have sometimes, and I also added have, and I replaced are with have been. For the rest, everything remains the same, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, MP Heyliger-Marten. Minister, you now have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you, MP Heyliger, for announcing what amendments have been made. Through you, Mr. Chairman, I would still ask MP Heyliger if she would be able to provide confirmation with regards to the Law Enforcement Council where that is written, because I've asked my staff if they could verify that that information was ever published by the Law Enforcement Council to state such, and in the event that the MP can provide us with confirmation of that, then I will absolutely accept same. Further down, when it goes into specifics of the consideration, point 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, there is a concern by the mention of that with an increasing crime rate for violent and heinous crimes, the pressure on the Point Blanch Prison facility will continue to increase at a rate not equated by the execution of improvement to the facility. Mr. Chairman, through you, there's a concern with it. So first of all, I want to be able to state the following. The ministry has absolutely no objection to a policy. As I've stated before, we are in the final phase of the policy. But when we state, and it goes on further to state, while the ad hoc release of prisoners executed to release the pressure on the facility could place citizens at risk. Very, very, very powerful words that are stated here that brings serious concern, because then, Mr. Chairman, where do we leave the conditional release work committee? Where do we leave the parole board? These two platforms are established with persons who are qualified and certified to be able to review the status of our inmates populations, the ones who are looking at updates, records of the behavior of our inmates, what crimes were committed, etc. And these are the individuals that do the review and make the advice and submit to the minister whether someone is or is not qualified according to these criteria that are set in law. We must remember, a policy can only be created on the legal basis of a law. Yes, so that is what has been used and is continuing to be used to determine whether someone qualifies for early release or not, ankle bracelet or not. So to use the terms ad hoc release gives the impression that individuals are, or there's favoritism, or there is no real platform that gives guidance to be able to determine who is fit or not to be released back into the same society we are speaking about, we need to ensure is safe. I move on down to 8.8, that it is in the interest of safety and security of the nation, as well as in the imprisoned and staff of the Point Blanch Prison, that adequate measures are taken to support, in the support of proper flow of prisoners and maintenance of the facility, to bridge the period until the facility can, in accordance, respect human rights, facilitate imprisonment of convicted persons in St. Martin. And to that point, Mr. Chairman, it is a case where, again, I think it is important that the Parliament of St. Martin receives once again what our population looks like. I think the Parliament of St. Martin needs to receive what our statistics look like, who is in prison and for what crimes. Because that very population we're speaking of, in support of making sure that they are qualifying for ankle bracelet and to be released back into our society, are individuals who are in for violent and heinous crimes. I am a proponent of the fact that, yes, indeed, if it is someone with less dangerous criminal offenses, if I may go so far as to say white-collar crime, and they are on the external on this waiting list, yes, these individuals should be considered for a more immediate opportunity to serve out their sentence. But I am concerned that we may not, in this platform, be fully aware of who is incarcerated and the level and seriousness of their crimes. So again, Mr. Chairman, we are fully in support of a proper structured policy, hence the reason that we've been working on same. We will do such, but I just wanted to address, because on this public platform, there are certain statements that are made that can give the wrong impression, and I think it's important for us to really be fully aware of what we're dealing with. Yes? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister Anna Richardson. We now go over to voting, handling of the motion, or voting on the motion, as we have come to the end of deliberations. We have one draft motion that has been presented and slightly amended. And does anyone need Hoofdelijke stemming? Yes, Hoofdelijke stemming requested. We will allow now a round of motivations before we go over to the voting. Does anyone wish to motivate his or her vote? MP Rolando Bryson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, motions have considerations that are considered to be subjective, the sentiment of Parliament, or what we have based on the information that is given. The main thing I think here that we shouldn't lose sight of is the fact that the resolution of this motion, the minister says she agrees, several members of Parliament agree with the resolution, and we can debate in other meetings about a lot of these things. But for example, the concern about whether the Rex Hunt having has an issue regarding human rights. Mr. Chairman, this helps me motivate why I have no issue with that statement, because I actually went to look at their most recent report regarding the prison. And in there, they state, based on the CPT, which is the human rights standard that you should have. They said that the council considers that the reports are both coherent and interrelated. They not only repeatedly elaborate on the deplorable state of the prison, but also repeatedly stresses the urgency of the issue. To quickly take appropriate measures to ensure that detainees are no longer detained in circumstances characterized both by the Council and the Institute for Human Rights as, quote, below minimum standard. Now, this is a report from 2019, which is why I asked MP Heyliger to say, which the change was agreed, has been. I don't think this is a discredit to the minister or what the ministry is doing, but we can't also deny and pretend like there have not been inhumane conditions at our prison. Sometimes we have to admit that we have had faults. And has the minister come a long way? I think so. But the motion states, I think correctly, that yes, inhumane situations have existed. And those considerations are put there to put in the framework that we don't want to go back there. The issue of ad hoc release and whether some people are being released, I recall recently, and maybe this is something, of course, yes, there's a parole board and so on, but there was an uproar in the community about someone that was convicted of very heinous crime, did sit for, I believe, 30-something years, but was up to be released. And if that person is released or not and goes back into society, the opinion of some would be that this might be a danger to society. What I do know in looking at all these considerations, and it leads to the resolve, we want to see a policy. So, Mr. Chairman, I won't nitpick on the considerations so much because I'm focusing on what the action from the minister will be as a result of this motion, and simply support the motion so that the minister can execute what I think will be good for St. Martin. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, MP Rolando Bryson. The next member to motivate their vote, MP Wescot-Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, good afternoon, and good afternoon to the Minister and her support staff. I want to thank the Minister for taking the time to look at and react to the motion. I think that's the way it should be in dealing with motions. We should hear from the person in charge, in this case, the Minister, his or her views on a particular motion. So I thank the Minister for that. However, while the Minister was in her right to also explain her views on some of the considerations in the motion, I believe what is important to note is that the Minister indicated that, in fact, the resolution of this motion, that the Minister can act even quicker than the motion is requiring of her in terms of the period of time of 2 months. So I want the Minister, through you, Mr. Chairman, to focus on that part. Yes, I too, and I will continue to do so, look critically at considerations in a motion, especially on the side of Parliament. That's what Parliament is considering. That's why they're called considerations. I have looked at the considerations in this motion, and I don't really think that they are exaggerations in the motion. Again, it's a feeling. It's what you hear with your ears to the ground. So I want to thank the Minister for her input. I believe it's important. It was important to hear from the Minister, but I think from the perspective of this motion, let us focus on the resolution of the motion. And the Minister has indicated, as I mentioned before, she is more than willing not only to comply, but comply even before the term proposed to the Minister is over, and that is the period of 2 months. Thank you for the opportunity to motivate my vote, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, MP Wescot-Williams. Does anyone else wish to motivate? Going once, going twice. Well, before we go over to voting, I too would want to motivate my vote. While I had my concerns about particularly some of the considerations, I believe the Minister has given views on them. And indeed, here and there, it can seem as if they are slightly politically tainted, over exaggerating on what the reality would be. I can imagine the minister's feeling that after working so hard with the new prison management to bring about changes, that Parliament would still use facts that are kind of outdated to substantiate their goals. The minister, however, said that as for the resolution, the minister could live with the resolution in the motion, particularly because the minister has already been working on a policy, and that policy will soon be ready. So that is welcome news. So for once, we may find a situation where a request in a motion will be handled even before those tabling the motion had set as sort of a deadline. So it is with a feeling of yes or no, no or yes, I will lend support to the motion, the draft motion, since the minister, for me that was the overriding factor, has stated that she can support the resolution in the motion. Having said that, we come now to the voting, and we will begin by shaking the box. Lucky number 7. Jij moet lezen.
Grisha Heyliger-Marten.
Before we do so, the motion was not read. The Parliament of St. Martin, in its meeting of today, June 23rd, 2023, cognizant of the fact that due to the conditions at the Point Blanch Prison and the lack of cells, persons imprisoned at the Point Blanch Prison have sometimes faced inhumane circumstances. Aware that this fact is supported by extensive reporting done by the Raad voor de Rechtshandhaving, the latter having established that the human rights of prisoners have been violated due to the described circumstances. Considering that based on the Article 132, Section 2 of the Criminal Code for St. Martin, the minister has the discretion as it relates to early release of prisoners or release under present preset conditions, that based on Section 4 and 7, the minister can determine both the procedure as well as the applicable conditions for an early release decision, that by ministerial decree, the issuance of the monitoring by early release of prisoners known as the Electronic Monitoring Ministerial Decree was set and applied. That said ministerial decree encompasses the policy of the minister for the application of the issuance of the release by ankle bracelet. That a current circumstance warrants a revisit, adjustment, and reinstatement electronic monitoring option to alleviate the pressure on the limited number of cells at the Point Blanch Prison and to safeguard the rights of prisoners and persons sentenced to imprisonment. That with an increased crime rate for violent and heinous crimes, the pressure on the Point Blanch facility will continue to increase at a rate not equaled by the execution of improvements to the facility, while the ad hoc release of prisoners executed to release the pressure on the facility could place the citizens at risk. That globally, the issue of the limited availability of cells is addressed with the enactment of early release programs or programs permitting the use of electronic monitoring devices for the execution of sentences in alternative form. That it is in the interest of the safety and security of the nation, as well as in the imprisoned, at and staff of the Point Blanch Prison, that adequate measures are taken in support of the proper flow of prisoners and the maintenance of the facility to bridge the period until the facility can, in accordance with respect to human rights, facilitate the imprisonment of convicted persons in St. Martin. That as an intermediary solution, the application of the early release program or the release under electronic monitoring is desired. Resolves: 1, to request the Minister of Justice to, within 2 months of the passing of this motion, enact a revised and updated electronic monitoring program on the basis of an updated policy on early release and release by electronic monitoring of persons eligible for early release, and goes over to the order of the day. The draft motion is presented by MP Grisha Heyliger-Marten and further supported by MP Chanel Brownbill, MP Akim Arundel, Melissa Gomes, Emmanuel Richardson, Sarah Wescot-Williams. Huh? What did I say? Christoph Emmanuel, my apologies. Sarah Wescot-Williams and Ludmila De Weaver. My apology for that. We now go over to the voting, and we start at number 7.
4. She did not mention my name.
Grisha Heyliger-Marten,
4.
George Pantoflet,
4.
Hyacin Richardson, 4. Angelique Ramu,
4.
Ludmilla De Weaver,
4.
Sarah Wescott-Williams,
4.
Akim Arundel,
4.
Rolando Bryson,
4.
Chanel Brownbill, 4. Christopher Emmanuel,
4.
Melissa Gomes, 4. William Marlin,
You read everybody name?
yes.
Okay. 4. There were 12 votes cast, all 12 in favor. My hesitation there was because I thought 1 or 2 members were left out. So all 12 votes in favor. This draft motion was unanimously accepted. We have come to the close of this meeting. Ladies and gentlemen, Minister and staff, we wish you all a pleasant good afternoon.